Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Aapresid, for inviting me to moderate this group of experts. And the third one in Germany, that we will have online presentation if we solve the problems we have with internet. Otherwise, we will extend this presentation. We have Silvia Imhoff, who's a graduate from the Esperanza University of the agricultural science. He's an expert of plant nutrition, and he's graduated from the University of Brazil and Ursel, Canada. She is a teacher in the soil technology, and he works in research in CONICET. She chairs the Argentine Association of Soil Science, and also he's a member of the International Union of Soil Science. His area of expertise is soil compaction and soil recovery with fertilizer, with organic manure fertilizer. And so the other lady has learned everything from Silvia. She's an agronomist. She has a PhD of agricultural science of the Universidad del Litoral. He has been an intern in the Directorate of Agricultural Emergency in Santa Fe. She has been a scholar in the CONICET, in the Institute of Agricultural Science. In 2022, he has been a teacher in soil technology. In 2023, in the School of Agricultural Science, he is a graduate in Statistics 1 and 2, and she has presented several papers on the compaction effect and different additional elements of the soil under controlled transit. So they will both make a short presentation for 20 minutes if we recover the internet connection. Otherwise, we will continue talking with them. Good afternoon. I want to thank your presence here. I want to thank Aapresid for the invitation and for giving us the opportunity to talk with you about our experience that we have been having for 9 years now. Eugenia will show information to you, data that she has collected in her thesis work. The question is how we improve the health of our soil. We know a lot on no-till, especially farmers, but in some situations that is not enough. We work in mid Santa Fe or in the northern part of Santa Fe, and this is very clear. So we started to analyze what new practices we could add to improve soil health. What is soil health? It's a soil that has the capacity to offer crops all they need, and for that we require appropriate temperature, nutrients, water, and air, and also we need to not to have resistance for the roots to develop, because if the plants don't have roots, they cannot make use of the nutrients in the soil. These conditions can be measured by a number of indicators, properties as structure, stability, density, hydraulic conductivity, and many others. This is what we see in soil physics and what allows us to know what's the condition of the soil regarding health and function of the soil. In spite of the fact that the farmers, these soils were farmed with no-till, we have very sludgy soils and silty soils. So we need other practices apart from no-till. This is how or why we started to look for new solutions to solve our management problem. First, we saw that the main problem was compaction. Soils were compacted. We didn't have this aggregation and this growth of roots because, as we know, machinery or machines are becoming heavier and heavier, so they put a lot of pressure on the soil, and this causes compaction. What happens when soils compact? Forces are applied onto the soil due to the weight of the machines. When forces or strength is applied by the weight of the machinery, the soil becomes compressed, and the pores on or the holes in the soil are destroyed. So there's no enough capacity to have air, but roots need this air because they need to capture oxygen. If these pores are too small, they have water, but the plant won't be able to absorb that water. And so the function of the soil gets complicated. And we start to see these laminar structures that stop the growth of roots into the deep part of the soil, the deeper part of the soil. One of the technologies that were being developed worldwide is what we call the controlled transit. This is a practice where machinery runs or rolls over on the same traces all the time. So transit traces are created dependent on the width of the machinery, and all the machinery runs always on those same traces. And so the soil starts to regenerate because it is no longer compacted. So roots start to expand, and so the soil starts to improve. And this has been measured. This has happened in 90 or 95% of the plots. The hoppers, the machinery, the planters are always, all the machinery is always running on these plots, and so we see that the machine go one way and the other way. So we can't see whether it is compacted or not because the whole surface has been transited. So now we have created this controlled transit, and we at least start to reduce that transit. We are controlling the transit. We started with this 9 years ago with 2 field trials. One field in Videla that belongs to a farmer who's an agronomist, and he's a friend of us. He's member of Aapresid, and he has been the president, the chair of the Videla region. And the other one is Marsola. One is in the Castellanos, and the other one is in Rafaela, close to Rafaela. These are pictures of this place. We selected some plots in the area where the same paths are run on, and this trial has been conducted for 9 years now. The idea is to show to you the results that we have been, or the findings that we have made in these trials. The idea is to put some numbers on this and to discuss about the findings in these results and see what are the conclusions that we arrived to referring to the transit. We evaluated different things, which is the mean diameter of aggregates. The aggregates that are important for roots and the one that range from 4 to 8 millimeters. In this orange column, we see the permanent transit path, and the green is the compaction-free area. In the first column, we have larger aggregates above the size of the LD one, and we see that the roots do not get into these aggregates, but rather they go around them. In this aggregates of 4 millimeters, we measured their stability to water flow. They are not much stable. When water comes in, they break and they become destroyed. Less than 30% of aggregates were stable to rainwater. In the compaction area, it is above 50%. This is a low. This is a low range, and this is common in our loamy, silty soils. Here we measured the apparent density from 0 to 10, 10 to 20, and 20 to 30 centimeters. We measured the pre-consolidation pressure. This indicates how much weight or how much pressure we can exert with the machines without compacting the soil. It has to do with the previous behavior or the regeneration status of the soil. You see that in deeper areas it's higher than in the compaction-free areas. We see that there is a difference in the 0 to 10, the 10 to 20 centimeters, and this has to do with the compaction bulb. As regard the pre-consolidation pressure or load capacity, in the first centimeters, there is a higher pressure in the non-compacted area, and probably this will compact faster. But in the trace, where the traces are, there is a higher resistance to pressure. We compare this to the pressures that we do with the machines today. This is about 200 kilopascals. This is the number for harvesters. This indicates that in our soil, when a machine passes, we are causing more compaction. We also evaluated other parameters related to water and air. Here we see the saturated hydraulic conductivity. This is related to infiltration, and see how low it is in compacted area, less than 2 millimeters per hour. Imagine if we have a rainfall of 20 millimeters, this would take 10 hours to infiltrate. This would be a saturation. If we go to the field and we see that the water takes longer to filtrate, probably if we take a shovel in that area, we will find that we have compaction problems. We also measure the air permeability. This is measured according to the field capacity, that is to say, the flow of air in the soil, and generally it is lower in permanent transit areas. We need available air in the field so that roots can breathe, and also we need this air to be exchanged in the soil surface. Another indicator is a quite interesting indicator because it includes several variables. This indicator marks the water content in the axis Y, where roots won't have any kind of resistance. They won't prevent growth. But apart from the field capacity, we see this red line and the wilt permanent point. We see that when the soil is humid, it provides 10% of air to the roots. But when the soil dries, it will prevent the growth of roots. So we see that this can be measured as a function of density. In all the densities that we found, roots will prevent their growth for lack of air or for high penetration resistance, although there is water available. Instead, in the compaction-free surface, most of the densities that we showed were lower, and practically there were no restrictions for root when water was available within the field and within the permanent wilt number. So the growth of roots was also measured, and this is what we found. See how roots grow in the permanent transit path. This is sunflower. It only grew about 10 centimeters. Remember that from 10 to 20 centimeters, we found higher density. The root does not grow further. It becomes more horizontal, and it has lower dry matter in kilograms. And this will be reflected in the air part. In the compaction-free surface, there is a larger root volume, and there is more resistant to compaction.
This eventually has an impact on carbon stock. In 2022 and 2023, we measured the carbon stock on the permanent transit path on the compaction-free surface. You may see that carbon stock is not changed, but take a look at the compaction-free surface that had many more roots. In 1 year, 500 kilos more per carbon in the non-transit area. And finally, this can be clearly seen on crop yield. This is sunflower, corn, soybean, and the different years. This is yield in sunflower and soybean. It was less than half than in the non-compacted area. Now, where are we? Are we closer to the green bars or to the orange bars? We may have a lot of compaction, and we may not reach the potential yield, and this is what we have to focus on. And finally, we also assessed the chemical part. We're losing lots of calcium in our soil. Calcium is a cation that has a large impact on pH, but it's also a cation that contributes to improving soil structure. So during the same years, 2022 and 23, we assessed how much calcium there was in the exchange complex. And we saw that pH was quite low, and that was due to low saturation with calcium, less than 60%. So we tried to find a solution, but leaving calcium carbonate, we know we have to disturb the soil to do this. It's not compatible with our controlled transit no-till system. So we implemented soluble calcium sources that will get added to the soil with planting or rainfall. And we can see that calcium saturation improves. So our goal now is to keep improving not only the chemical part, but also the impact on the physical property I showed to you in the future. To conclude, what are the practices we implement to take care of our soils? It's not one thing. We have to do lots of things. Soil cover, replace cations, increase organic matter, and especially prevent compaction. This cannot be achieved with only one thing, but a combination of activities. No-till is a must, as well as replacing calcium, using soluble calcium so as not to disturb the soil, and implement new technologies such as controlled transit. Finally, I'd like to discuss the following in case you're interested in controlled transit. How can you do it? As Silvia said, the idea is to have order in our transit. There you can see the control infraseek farming calculator. These are the machines that the farmers are using. Here we entered the tractors, which have the largest weight, and the harvesters. In the program, we give you back something like this. You can choose a combination of tractors and harvesters, and it will depend a lot on the width of the machines. You can see the width is not exactly the same, because otherwise you won't see the difference between the tractor and the harvester. You can see that the harvester's width is a bit larger, but you can see that the goal is achieved to have the larger number of green bars. In order to do this, we need the width to be multiples. You may have to do some adjustment so that if we are working on our lot with a cone, we will not be affecting transit too much. And if you don't want to have controlled transit, then there are many other alternatives to improve at least transit within the plots. A very simple alternative is what you see at the bottom left. In order to prevent going all around the same way, you can go one way and then come back the other way. In this way, you are stepping on the same plot less than if you won't do this. There are other adjustments. You can see this charge cone has been extended here. That's the platform I mentioned. We may block some blocks. It's not that this is an advertising, because it isn't. Sometimes you may have to change the tires because these cones are becoming increasingly heavier, so the pressure is quite high. So you may have to change and replace the tires with radial tires. This is another very interesting alternative. So controlled transit. And that's it. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you, Silvia and Eugenia. There's a question here which I think is very important. Is compacted soil reversible? Nice question. Compacted soil, that is, compaction may be reverted up to a certain extent. That's the big problem. If we exceed the value mentioned by Eugenia, that's called pre-consolidation pressure, capacity to resist weight, if we exceed that value, then the soil will be compacted to a level that is very difficult to reverse. And if we keep on exceeding those levels, compaction will be larger and it will become increasingly difficult to reverse the situation until it gets to a point where it is almost impossible. Why? Because the structure as we all see it, well, you see the aggregates or bulks, but that is a macro picture. But the small aggregates that are inside those big blocks, well, they're inside, compaction there is impossible to be broken with machines, and if it's too hard, then the roots will not be able to get into them. This is why when it is so dense, so compact, it's difficult to get life into it. Not even microorganisms will get there. So you may say, yes, compaction may be reverted, and you need lots of organic matter to do this in different ways, different sources, but at the same time, the soil needs to have the necessary conditions for roots to grow, because roots will be the main source of carbon and nutrients, because those are the ones that generate life in the larger pores where water and air may circulate. So we want to reverse compaction. We cannot think that it can be reverted just by using one machine and then I can keep doing the same things I've been doing. This is why we insist in that it's got to be a mix. And that mix implies implementing different management measures that range from implementing the right rotation, trying to add carbon to the soil, the necessary nutrients, and at the same time, if you start organizing transit at least, then that will be a major step forward. I'd like to clarify something here. During these trials, within the different transit paths, from the very beginning, we started by compacting the soil with different intensities to simulate the different compaction situations we find in the different fields. We had very little time, so we're not able to show everything. These data are data from the paths with the largest compaction levels. After 9 years, I don't know whether Pico is around. because we've worked in his field. After 9 years, we started with very good conditions without compaction, but 9 years later, even if we always go over the same path, there are no differences in production. This is what happens mostly when people do not realize the true potential yield because compaction is all over. So the goal of this study is to show the losses that are sometimes not so visible. Thank you, Silvia. There is another question here. What are the commercial or wash crop or cash crop necessary to get the best potential? The roots are key. The more roots we have in the soil, then the better, because that will improve the structure. And as we've already seen, if the roots grow and stay in the soil, that improves carbon level in time, and that improvement in organic matter will also improve the structure. So rotation and as varied as possible. And if we are using controlled transit, what would be the tracks on those areas where there is compaction? Controlled transit. In controlled transit, there are two alternatives. When the wheel tracks are compacted and you see reduced yield, you can stop planting. That is controlled transit per se. In other countries, well, nothing is planted on the tracks. They only plant in between the tracks because those tracks help you to get into the plot earlier when it's still wet. It also allows you to harvest earlier, so the tracks are not planted. That's a part of the surface where no seeds are wasted. In some areas where there was no initial compaction, everything is planted, but after 9 years we see no differences, so it makes no sense in planting there. But in some areas, if after many years you see reduced production, then you can choose not to plant in the tracks. Well, unfortunately, Silvia and Eugenia will have to listen to the next speaker. We have been lucky and we have been able to get internet back. Doctor, are you there? Yes, I'm here. Good afternoon. Unfortunately, Murphy's Law got in between. I will introduce Theodor Friedrich quickly, so you can make your presentation later. Theodor Friedrich was born in Venezuela. He's German. He has a degree from Göttingen University in Germany. He has a master's degree in agronomy and a PhD in agricultural engineering. Since 1992, he has worked and held different positions in international agricultural development. He has worked as a professor, researcher. He has participated in cooperation projects in Latin America, Europe, and Asia. From 1994 to 2012, he was senior FAO officer working on sustainable agricultural systems, rules and procedures for the use of pesticides, and sustainable intensification of agriculture. He has a 25 years long track record. He has worked in over 75 countries, published over 200 publications. Between 2012 and 2018, he was a representative of the FAO in Cuba and between 2018 and 2020. He has also been a representative in Bolivia. I give you the floor. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to participate, at least remotely, in this important event. And I'd like to talk a little bit about soil care to reduce the negative environmental impact. To start, why should we take care of our soils? Out of soil, we get 95% of our food, and consequently, soil is the basis for human survival on this planet. So, soil is the most important thing for us, but furthermore, the soil plays different environmental roles. So the soil is not just an inert mineral matter. Soil is a living habitat. It purifies water, keeps it in the water table. It's the habitat of a biodiversity that feeds food network above the soil and facilitates access of plants to micronutrients and secondary ingredients, turning them more nutritious and healthier for consumers. This is a recent discovery that has shown that healthy soil produces healthy food, and healthy soil means a live and diverse soil. But on the other hand, we have only 60 years of productive soil left. This is a statement by the FAO General Director. It may be exaggerated. In some regions of the world, we may have 100 or 200 years of productive soil, but it's quite a reduced and limited time. Degradation of soil will put an end to human beings before climate change. Today, 66% of the land is degraded. 100% of cultivated surface area is being degraded. This is a map of the world, and you can see that everywhere where human beings have performed agricultural activity, the soil is being degraded. It's very difficult to stop this global process. And what is slightly degraded today will be seriously degraded or very seriously degraded tomorrow and will eventually become a desert. And this is not the role of modern agriculture. This is a process that has been with us since we started practicing agriculture. It has led to the disappearance of empires or whole peoples. And talking about the process, we always say that tree cutting or felling is a cause for degradation. Well, that's new. That's not true. This is what starts the process, but eventually there are other activities. The first agricultural activity invented by humankind, which is mechanical tilling. And today we know that tilling, mechanical alteration of soil or disturbance of soil, causes degradation that is quite above the natural soil formation. Evolution has not foreseen mechanical tilling of the soil. I've already said that soil is a live being. It's a habitat. So what happens with soil? When we till the soil, it first loses cover and protection. We have seen this, and this is why our first concern has always been erosion control. But what we did not see was that with tillage, we reduce soil biodiversity. We create more bacteria and fewer major species. I'm talking of fungi, fauna, worms, even macrofauna living on the soil. And we also add oxygen, and with this, bacteria can accelerate breakdown of organic matter. We practically burn organic matter. CO2 goes out to the atmosphere, and soluble nutrients are released in water. This is one of the reasons why we started doing tillage, because when we till virgin soil, it's like fertilizing it.
Quieren los macroporos conectados, que son la labor de los lombrices, de las raíces, de la vida del suelo. Y estos son poros que con ninguna labranza podemos crear, sino solamente destruir. Y con la destrucción de estos macroporos conectados, también reducimos la capacidad del suelo de infiltrar agua. Y el agua que infiltra eventualmente en este suelo labrado lava la matriz del suelo y lleva con sí los nutrientes solubles en agua. Con esto, agua contaminada sale de la superficie, escorrentía superficial, porque no infiltra suficiente, y lo que infiltra lava y salen otra vez también aguas contaminadas por exhalación. Entonces, si esto pasa en un tiempo de cambio climático con más.
If this happens during climate change with extreme events, heavy storms, this will cause soil loss, water loss, aquifers are lost, and other inputs are lost. Instead, when we see the native soil, non-disturbed soil, this is the condition, the status of the soils as they originally grow. If we don't till the soil, we can measure that the soil grows 1 millimeter per year. But if we till the soil after a storm heavy, we can lose several centimeters. We see that this processes are quite speedy. Also, organic matter increases by 0.1, 0.2% per year, depending on the rotten material or the climate and the soil condition. These are averages. Also, a spatial structure is established with its own life, with roots, with earthworms, and so roots can go deep down and they connect directly with the aquifers. The fungi in the soil enable the mobilization and the production of micronutrients, and the crops are healthier. And it also produces fertilizer. It produces it making the nutrients available. This also enables adaptation to rain due to better infiltration, and at the same time it enables adaptation to drought. More organic matter means more water. It means deeper roots, and they can go further down, deeper down than with till soils, and we have less water loss due to the soil cover. This is a scheme. In case of heavy rain on tilled soil, we can lose as much as 90% of water in surface runoff, and only 10% eventually will infiltrate. Instead, a non-till soil, a virgin natural soil, native soil, can infiltrate as much as 100 millimeters per hour, and at the same time this water comes into the aquifer with no contamination, non-polluted water. When we talk about soil and water, we also talk about forests. Due to the importance of forests for the water cycle, forests create rain because they evaporate and they transpire water, and they also transpire condensation nuclei. Therefore, trees and forests create a microclimate with more rain than in areas that don't have forests. That's why we say that forests create water. Also, because of the infiltration capacity of the soil in this forest. But this infiltration capacity does not depend on trees, but rather on the non-tilled soil structure, because you don't till forest soil. In agricultural areas, the soils that are being tilled, they are degraded, compacted, and with lower infiltration capacity. And in times of climate change, this becomes worse. So we are talking about an apocalyptic scenario. We degrade soil, water, and forest in climate change time. But at the same time, we need to produce food for a growing population. And so the FAO made a proposal in 2019, proposed a sustainable intensification of plant production. We need to produce more, but at the same time, we cannot degrade the environment. And is by no means. Instead, we need to regenerate the capacity of environmental services. The definition of sustainable intensification is as much production as possible with all the available technologies, keeping environmental impact below the environment recovery capacity, the natural resources recovery capacity. Each natural resource, each cycle of recovery is different. That's why it's different the way we have to take care of environment. That's why I'm going back to focusing on the soil. Tillage, the soil is the most vulnerable system in our agricultural and environmental system. Impact of tillage is much higher than the impact of agrochemicals. We can talk about the impact of days, weeks, or months, depending on the product when we talk about agrochemical, but the impact of tillage lasts more than a lifetime before the soil recovers. The soil tillage results in soil erosion. So no system, including mechanical soil tillage, can be sustainable. Tillage and burns are biocides, more powerful than agrochemicals. And this is the proposal of conservation agriculture. You probably might know this by the name of no-till, but the term no-till in different parts of the world is understood in different ways, and so it has not a clear explanation. In 1997, this term of conservation agriculture was defined, and this was clearly established, the meaning of this term. Conservation agriculture is a system that does not include tillage and does not include burning. It is based on three interconnected principles: minimal disturbance of the soil continually. This includes also compaction transit on the soil or traffic on the soil also results in an unrecoverable compaction. The second principle is the permanent organic coverage of the soil. And the third one is diversifying crops in sequence or in association. This association can be in perennial crops. Rotation can be made in annual crops. Also, we talk about mixed crops. There are plenty of possibilities, but we talk about as diversifying as much as possible. Rotating 2 crops is not crop rotation. Minimum 3 crops or more, and also not only cover crops, also other crops. That's why conservation agriculture provides the basis for sustainability in these systems. We also talk about regenerative agriculture, or you can use any of those descriptions. You can also talk about organic agriculture. Everything is possible, but sustainability of this construction boils down to conservation agriculture. This house it have 3 pillars, but if one of these pillars is missing, the house may keep on. But if we don't have the 3 pillars, it will be destroyed completely. The impact of conservation agriculture is that the soil will produce more, less inputs are used, it's resilient to climate shocks, whatever it is, drought, cold, heat, heavy storm. It's always resilient. Carbon emissions are reduced and carbon is sequestered. This means mitigation of climate change. It can be applied to any farming scale, small growers, small producers, and larger ones, and it works in every agricultural production systems. So it can be applied in tubers, in roots. You know that no-till has a background, your country has participated as part of this background. We I think that this can be taken back to the Dust Bowl in 1933, both conservation agriculture or no-till. From then on, the first American pioneer who started with no-till agriculture, that was in 1962, almost 30 years after the event, the Dust Bowl event. And 10 years later, we have the first pioneer in Brazil, when in 1972, he converted his farm in a no-till farm. Later on, this was developed into Australia, Africa, and Asia. And 10 years later, a revolution of no-till in Latin America occurred. The FAO was interested in this, and they disseminated. And in the year 2001, the first Conservation Agriculture Congress was held, and we can say that no-till had a global growth. Today, we have 250 million hectares under no-till, talking about annual crops, without considering perennial crops that can also be added to this, or also the what we call the mob grazing, which has to do with pastures. But all this works in the long term if we are able to integrate all the conservation agriculture together in an optimal manner, and not partially, and not only a little. Not only 2 crops in the rotation. No, we have to optimize rotation so that this system does not only has impact on agricultural products but also on environmental services. No tillage is not sustainable in the long term. It does not prevent erosion or flood. It's coverage that protects the soil and feeds the underground fauna. It creates next to the roots the structure of a stable soil and resistant or time-proof. Only plant crops that generate high cash as soybean degrade the soils. Only one crop. It increases the cost for insecticides and pesticides and herbicides, and it results in the ecological collapse and economic collapse of the system. I have seen these in soybean and peanut. Monoculture is not sustainable with or without tillage. And we have to be careful with relying too much on industrial inputs, because this gives money only to the industries, to the companies, and not to the growers. So there are good things provided by the industry, but we must not rely too much on them. Remember that an overuse of Roundup brought about problems that now we are facing. In conclusion, soil tillage is not sustainable. The soils are degraded by tillage as a principle, as a main cause. There is an impact on water resources and other natural resources and environmental services, biodiversity and climate, worsening climate change and its impact. With conservation agriculture means an agriculture system that is productive, economic for the farmer, and that regenerates natural resources and environmental services, and is sustainable in the long term. Conservation agriculture is not only helpful to control erosion or to reduce cost, but also it has other benefits. A global experience have shown the benefits and positive impacts of conservation agriculture, including the health of consumers. There are also negative experiences where, as a result of misleading policies or pressures by the industry of agricultural inputs, or because of economic temptation for the long term, they forgot about 1 or 2 principles of conservation agriculture, which resulted in a complete failure of the system. We require public initiatives or private initiatives, always keeping the incentive for growers in order to keep improving in conservation agriculture. With conservation agriculture, we are talking about agriculture for the future, and the future of agriculture and the future of mankind. Thank you very much.
Gracias, doctor.
Thank you, Doctor. Excellent. I fully agree with you. And the first question that comes to me, what are we going to die of? We are going to die of mistreating the soil, or are we going to die of climate change? I've already answer this question. I think that the soil will kill us before climate change, because the mistreatment of the soil will impact different parts of the world. The tropical areas or in Europe, soils do not resist climate events that we have today. And we have effects that in South America you had in the 70s. We are suffering that now in Germany, droughts, floods. So soil degradation has that trend. Thank you. I have a question for you. Don't you think that for compaction, don't you think that the factor that triggered this problem was the nitrogen fertilization, acidizing the soils and causing loss of magnesium and calcium? I don't think I understood all the questions. That question has to do with the soil chemistry. The nitrogen fertilization, acidizing the soils, increasing saturation, and another cause would be the loss of calcium and magnesium. The overusing nitrogen as a fertilizer, but also natural nitrogen, has a negative impact on the soil system when it is exaggerated. We saw this in soy crop. So much nitrogen gets into the soil system compared to the carbon coming into the soil that this results in a degradation of organic matter. At the same time, some fertilizers, among them many nitrogen fertilizers, can acidize the soil that with heavy storms can become worse. We have to take care of this. That's why I talked about not relying so much on inputs, industrial inputs. I think that we need to have enough legumes in the system. And this way we can substitute nitrogen fertilizers fully with natural ways to add nitrogen. In no-till soils, we have situations where bacteria, they capture nitrogen from the atmosphere and they can appear freely in the soil, and they can have on the crops the effect on the rhizomas as happens in the legumes. The earthworms in their guts also have these bacteria. That's why the compost works as a nitrogen fertilizer, because earthworms also increase the nitrogen content in the system. So that would be the livestock, underground livestock, but we also have surface livestock. In agricultural soils, where we have cover crops and we have livestock, what we should take into account?
Hola.
Hello. Well, I think that the combination of activities is the ideal solution. If it were possible to do agricultural and cattle breeding rotation, that would be the best. What is it we have to take care of? Same care that we have with machinery. We have to avoid compacting because of excessive animal density, especially on wet soil. any animal or machine with an excessive humidity load will affect the soil as well as the crop. So we need an integrated management of the whole system. I may have excellent grasslands, it rains, I have lots of humidity, so I have to be aware of the fact that I need a surface where, considered excess humidity, I will have a barn or any other place that is drier. That is, we have to go back to the comprehensive integrated system, avoiding overstepping on wet soil. That's key to avoid degradation. Well, thank you, Dr. Friedrich. I'm sorry about the internet issues, but there's another speaker waiting. So I hope next year we will have you here with us. And we thank you, Silvia and Eugenia, for the content they shared with us. See you next time. Thank you very much. I'd love to be there in person. But this time there was a conflict with the International Conservation Agriculture Conflict, so I was not able to travel. But thank you very much, and I'll be happy to visit next year. You cannot be at the same time all over the place.